What is behind the troubles in Ethiopia today? Now, normally I would avoid these topics. My focus is on God's completion of the covenant of rescue and salvation for His people Israel. I write about things leading up to the final affliction and judgment day for this earth. We are instructed by our God to watch for the signposts leading to that day. For example, he wrote Mark 13:37, "And what shall I say to you? To all I say, be vigilant." Mark 13:34. It is as a man going abroad, leaving his house, and giving to his servants the authority, and to each one his work. And to the doorkeeper he gave charge that he should be vigilant. Luke 12:37. Blessed those servants whom the Lord coming shall find being vigilant. Amen, I say to you, that he will gird himself and lay them down, and going by, he will serve them. Luke 11:35. Watch then, lest the light, the one in you, is darkness. With that said, I consider the situation in Ethiopia a special case that warrants looking into. I consider Ethiopians and others as our Hamite cousins. Furthermore, and can easily empathize with them in their fight against America, the Americans and their Western backers. The Bible categorically states that the action of the evil empire leads to their eventual destruction and is one of the signposts that leads to Judgment Day. I want to remind you that if you had watched my video, America is the Babylon of the Bible, you will understand, you'll get a perspective of this video itself. A link to that video is in the description. I urge you to check it out. Now, the Ethiopian terrorist group, the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, TPLF, may have visibility, but they are only a front for the American imperialism. The real culprit in the driver's seat are the Americans themselves and their Western allies. While the Western press spins a false narrative that their opponent, Prime Minister Abiy, and the Ethiopian government are the bad guys. Apparently, this was very effective because in the early days of the conflict, it worked quite well. Many ignorant Negroes were siding with the terrorist group, TPLF. There were talks about the Ethiopian government carrying out genocide against the Tigrayan people. Alas, this was all fake news by the Western press. The real culprit is American imperialism. Their victims are the Tigrayan and the Ethiopian people in general. Most Ethiopians are on the side of the government. I can understand the feelings of a few Tigrayans. Obviously, they feel for their families back home who are caught in the cycle of violence. But they should understand that America and the rebels instigated this situation. Indeed, many Tigrayans have been able to see through this evil, but you won't see that reflected in the American fake news. Now, I'm going to give you a little snippet of a BBC report. So, it kind of lays out the foundation of what's really going on. And when you look up this video, you can be sure that is the American who are sponsoring this video. You see this American government official. I know they're the one that made up this video, but just watch and see.
I can't sleep at night is because I'm thinking about all of them. Who is starving? Which one is starving? Where are they starving? Where are they hiding? We've heard stories of people living in caves, eating grass, and that's how they've survived. Since June 28th, I have had zero contact with any of my family members that are still in Tigray, and so it's been really hard.
Our mom is crying! Please, we need help! We need help!
This is the U.S. government. I know we're not going to flip things around on a dime like that, right? And so this is a process.
We have one government, that's what we know. Let that government help. There is no way that the US or the Europe or anybody to say, do like this. We know how to do it, let us help our own people.
The U.S. government totally rejects accusations that it's taking sides in the conflict. It says that's pure fantasy. It's condemning violence carried out by all parties because no one's hands are clean. But that doesn't convince many Ethiopians who are so passionately committed to their side.
Ethiopia is defending its territory. TPLF is on the offense. They're trying to take territory. We can't hear negotiated ceasefire when we're dealing with a rebel group, not only a rebel group, with a terrorist group.
I wouldn't call them rebels. They are Tigrayans who are fighting back. We don't have a choice. Ethiopia's entire government has come down on a minority group.
Now, at this point, I want to give you another perspective that is opposed to the Western media. This is coming from a Tigrayan news person. I want you to check it out. It's called War in Ethiopia, Fueled by Western Propaganda. I am leaving a link to this in the description. This is very important as it's coming from a Tigrayan. She knows also that this is just Western propaganda and nonsense. Now, how this all got started out. Now, the best place to start is that of Imperial Ethiopia under Haile Selassie. Since independence, quite a few world leaders have graced the soil of Jamaica with an official visit. Noteworthy are Emperor Haile Selassie, April 1966, Julius Nyerere, September 1974, Fidel Castro, 1977, Nelson Mandela, July 1991, Hugo Chavez, 2007. I was not living in Jamaica at the time of Chavez's visit. That is a man I respect as a friend of our people. Obviously, by now, you know I am Jamaican. But the moment that stood out for me was that of Emperor Haile Selassie's visit to Jamaica. I was 11 years old when he came to inaugurate a school in his honor, less than a couple furlongs from where I lived. I was never cool with Rastafarianism, but I could really roll with Selassie. You should remember that during this time, many wars of independence was going on in Africa, and I hated colonists. Emperor Haile Selassie is from the Amara ethnic group. The Amara culture dominated throughout his rule. He was born July 23, 1892, and reigned 2nd of April 1930 to 12th of September 1974, when he was overthrown by a military junta. Selassie will be remembered as the greatest Pan-Africanist. He paid less attention to domestic affairs and devoted more to foreign endeavors. In 1963, he presided over the formation of the Organization of African Unity, the precursor of the African Union, and served as its first chairman. But he was remembered for banning the Oroma language from education, public speaking, and use in the administration. He also presided over the forced integration of Eritrea into the empire. Obviously, his reign had mixed reviews, depending on whom you ask. Ethiopia's problem today are a toxic mix of ethnicities. Now, today's upheaval of Ethiopia has its root in the toxic mix of ethnic groups. It contains Oromos, that is 34.6%, Amharas, that is 27.1%, Somalis, that's 6.2%, Tigrayans, that's 6.1%, and dozens of other central and southern based groups making up the balance. These include Sidemas, Gurages, Welata, Adia, etc. Selassie, as the emperor, was able to keep the empire together. The people felt subject under the empire, not as ethnic groups. So it was natural that as soon as he was gone, it would be every ethnicity for themselves. Then entered Mengistu Haile Mariam, a junior army officer, in 1974 and overthrew Selassie. In June 1974, Mengistu became the chairman of the Armed Force Coordinating Committee, otherwise known as the DERG, which assumed the function of the government. He nationalizes industries and farmlands. Remember, he's a Marxist, and this was during the height of the Cold War. Therefore, you know that these acts couldn't escape the attention of the evil empire, America. During this same period, a severe drought adversely impacted the Ethiopian economy. If that wasn't enough trouble for him, at the same time, he faced insurrection in the northern region of Tigray as well as Eritrea. Meanwhile, America was funneling arms to their adopted client, the TPLF. Joining with other opposition movements, they formed the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, EPRDF, in May 1991, following the withdrawal of Soviet support, which seriously weakened the Mengistu's regime. The EPRDF forces advanced on Addis Ababa, and they overthrew his regime. A government was formed which was dominated by the EPRDF coalition, which in turn was led by the ethnic Tigrayans, that's the TPLF. Therefore, at this point, the evil empire was firmly in charge of Ethiopia and its people. Tamrat Lane, he's an Amaran. Going forward, you may get a little confused about the politics of the time, since you previously heard that the Tigrayans ruled Ethiopia for 3 decades. You may be wondering how an Amaran became the head of Ethiopia after they overthrew Mengistu. Let me sort this out for you real quickly. During the Civil War, the TPLF and the EPLF were the only major forces fighting. Of course, these two armies could try to march to Addis Ababa and take over the country. But the EPLF was not interested in that. That's the Eritrean group. They just want to succeed from Ethiopia. But the TPLF wanted politics, economic, and military lordship in Ethiopia. But they realized that marching on Addis Ababa was a non-starter. The people there regarded them as a foreign invading force. They would be destroyed by the people and the regional rebel groups. The people in Addis Ababa was already getting restive, and there was daily demonstration. Then the Americans came in with a plan to help them out, that is the TPLF. What came out of that negotiation was a 3-man EPRDF/TPLF representation to run the country for a transitional period. Tamrat Lane became one of the 3-man EPRDF slash TPLF representative that ruled the country. His position was Prime Minister. He was an Amaran. Now, Meles Zenawi was the president. He was a Tigrian. And C.A. Abraha was the Minister of Defense. He was a Tigrian. You see what just happened there? The American put the TPLF solidly in charge of Ethiopia. Tamrat Lane was just a figurehead. He served from the 6th of June 1991 until the 22nd of August 1995. The real power was that of Meles Zenawi, the president who succeeded him as Prime Minister. He was eventually arrested and imprisoned. Meles Zenawi Azres is a Tigrian. Ostensibly ruled from 1995 to 212 when he died. But remember, as I said, effectively he was ruling from 1991 as the president. Okay, so he was the head of the dominant Tigrian People's Liberation Front, TPLF, in the ruling EPRDF coalition. His rule was marked by a rapid economic development. The TPLF dominated in politics and economics in the heart of the Amhara domain, Addis Ababa. There they stoked increasing inter-ethnic tensions. Okay, so he died on the 20th of August 2012. Then Haile Mariam Desalegn took over. He was a Waleta. He a member of the smaller tribes, the southern tribes. Now, Haile Mariam Desalegn came to power. Well, he became Prime Minister the 20th of August 2012, as I said, when the other Meles Zenawi died. And he stayed there until April 2018. As I said, he was from the minority tribe, the Walata, and served as Vice President under Meles Zenawi Azres. When Meles Zenawi Azres died, he was somewhat of a compromise selection. In effect, he just extended the rule of the TPLF in Ethiopian politics. They were still in charge of Ethiopia. Then came Abiy Ahmed. This is the Prime Minister that we have now, the one in question. Now, he became the democratically elected Prime Minister of Ethiopia in 2018. He is a member of the Oromo ethnic group. Previously, he was elected to the House of People's Representative as a member of the Oromo's People Democratic Organization, OPDO, which was part of the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, as I just said previously, EPRDF. Ruling coalition. Of course, the TPLF being the dominant member. Remember? The fact that Abiy was a very popular leader in Ethiopia was not lost on the American and the West when they awarded him the bogus Nobel Peace Prize in 2019. They were obviously trying to mold his opinion and politics to themselves. But the ultimate reality of Abiy Ahmed governance was that the American and the TPLF was uprooted from their entrenched economic and political superiority in Ethiopia. This would not sit well with these actors, so they came up with a plan of action against him. Now, in the early hours of November the 4th, 2020, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, attacked the Ethiopian National Defense Force base located in Tigray region. The TPLF view is that the Ethiopian National Defense Force is a foreign army. They seized massive amount of military equipment and murdered and took thousands of soldiers captive. This is clearly a terrorist act. When asked for the reason for the attack, the TPLF claim was that they were just preempting an attack by the federal government. Then they upped the ante. They manufactured military outfits resembling that of the Eritrean National Defense Force to implicate the Eritrean government into the conflict. Obviously, America and Western press had a great time with this because of their prior hatred for the Eritrean regime. For the federal government, all this amounted to crossing a red line, which could not go unanswered. War was inevitable. Therefore, the government counterattacked. Amid all this chaos, there were lots of other inter-ethnic retribution and scores settlement. Tens of thousands of Tigrayan civilians moved west, deeper into Tigray, as they fled western Tigray from their Amhara pursuers who claimed their fertile fields. There were claims of rape, killings, and looting. There was even the laughable accusation that Eritrean soldiers were holding Tigrayan women as sex slaves. Among all this, the United Nations reported 350,000 Tigrayans are experiencing famine, with millions more at risk. The UN aid chief accused Ethiopia of using food as a weapon of war. America and Western propaganda was at its gruesome best. Now, all this was just setting the tone for American intervention on behalf of the TPLF. On November 28, 2020, Abiy tells Parliament that operations in Tigray are over and federal forces control the Tigrayan capital, Mekelle. But after months of battles in the surrounding countryside, on June 29, 2021, the TPLF forces counterattacked and retook control of Mekelle. On July 13, 2021, TPLF forces pushed south and west into lands claimed by neighboring Amhara region. Then they also pushed east, attacking the neighboring Afar region. There were talks from the terrorists that they are not far from and would soon take the capital Addis Ababa. Western powers removed their ambassadors, spreading of fears that Ethiopia was disintegrating. Then there was the parade of thousands of Ethiopian federal soldiers ostensibly captured during the terrorist advance. But this was part of the Western press propaganda, because these were the same video footage of federal troops they already captured before the war started. There was a flurry of diplomatic activities, threats of sanction if Ethiopia doesn't agree to negotiation. Then America's shameless imperialist lackeys, Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa and Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya, went into overdrive promoting ceasefire. And remember, this was all during the time the Western press promoting a narrative of Ethiopia as being on the back foot. But the West knew the terrorists could not succeed. They knew what was coming, and it was a good time for them to eke out some semblance of success for the TPLF client, and that is through negotiation. Now, on October 11, 2021, Ethiopia launches a ground offensive aimed at pushing the Tigrayan forces out of Amara and Afar. The next week, Ethiopia restarted air strikes in Tigray. At some point, the TPLF fled back to Tigray region like cornered rats. They came under a massive onslaught of drones attack, which were, provided by Turkey, Iran, the UAE, and possibly China. The federal Ethiopian forces and their allied ethnic militias defeated the terrorists in a matter of days. The fact that Abiy personally went into the battle himself should have been a hint that the front line was safe. Later, the TPLF spokesperson, Getachew Reda, would tweet that by withdrawing, that is, quote, that by withdrawing, we believe we have taken away whatever excuse the international community has to explain its feet dragging when it comes to putting pressure on Abiy Ahmed and his regional partners in crime to stop their genocide campaign in Tigray. But in a letter to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, TPLF leader Debretsion Gebremichael called for an immediate cessation of hostilities and said he hoped the rebels' withdrawal would be a decisive opening for peace. But obviously, there's a big difference between fleeing and withdrawing. Now that the dust has settled, and the government has apparently brought back some semblance of order in Ethiopia, it's a good time to reflect. Now, despite what you heard from the Western press and the American administration, at no time was there any danger of the terrorists overthrowing the regime in Addis Ababa. All the people of Ethiopia disliked them, to say the least. Nobody forgot their 3 decades of dominating Ethiopia. Years ago, they became part of the forces that overthrew the Derg. They were the major component of the EPDRF at that time. The rebel movement welcomed the TPLF for the enormous, that is, American provided firepower they brought to the equation. But even then, the people in Addis Ababa resisted them with demonstrations. It was the intervention of the USA that helped them grease their way to some semblance of acceptance among the EPDRF coalition and the people. But today, it would be impossible for them to march into Addis Ababa and not be annihilated quickly, much more to take over the administration. These terrorists just don't have that capability. All the actors, including American administration, knew this. Therefore, the playbook was negotiation. That is the only way for them to get a foothold back into the prominence they once had. Now, this is straight out of the American Imperialist playbook. While the terrorists were deployed in the Amara region, a U.S. Embassy security message warned its citizens of possible terrorist attack in the country. The U.S. administration repeatedly told the citizens to leave Ethiopia immediately. They warned there will be no Afghanistan-style evacuation if the war's chaos reached the capital. Unable to violently change the government, they employ varied alternative tools. Sow discord and fear among the populace. Threaten sanctions and create pretexts for prosecution for human rights violation, while using the Western press to spread disinformation about the realities on the ground. But the Ethiopians were aware. In an Associated Press report from Nairobi, Kenya, Ethiopia's government on Thursday warned the United States against spreading false information as fighting in the country's year-long war drew closer to the capital, Addis Ababa, while thousands protested outside the US and British embassies. At the same time, government spokesman Kebede Deisa said Ethiopia's war is not only against forces from the country's Tigray region, but also with colonialism of the powerful states of the West. He calls it an existential war and appeals to fellow Africans for support in a struggle against Western intervention. So Abiy posted on Facebook urging his citizens to take up arms and fight the Tigrayan forces. Quote, "Our people should march with any weapons and resources they have to defend, repulse, and bury the terrorist TPLF. The post was deemed inflammatory and was later taken down by Facebook for inciting violence. Can there be a more blatant interference in the affairs of a nation? A prime minister urging his countrymen to defend the country from armed insurgents, but an American press think it is inflammatory. What gall! Meanwhile, using terrorists to attack and cause pandemonium. Under all these pressure, they hoped the government would buckle and opt for negotiation. All this idea about terrorists advancing on the capital was just fake news. Not a chance. The American-backed terrorist client TPLF was just looking for a foothold via negotiation to put them back into prominence. So now that the dust has settled, what next? On December the 20th, 2021, Tigray TPLF warlord Debretsion Gebremichael issued an appeal for the UN to intervene to help end the war and the blockade. He is obviously implying that Ethiopian forces are blockading humanitarian aid. He called for a no-fly zone over Tigray and the opening of a humanitarian corridor, as well as arms embargo on Ethiopia and neighboring Eritrea. Wonder where he got that idea from and that authority. There is no entity in the UN called Tigray region. This crook was earlier threatening declaring a war of independence for Tigray if the war didn't go his way. Obviously, it didn't go his way. But he was just parroting his masters, the American. Do you recall the times of Gaddafi in Libya, where the West employed a no-fly zone that helped the opposition to overthrow him? That is what they're settling on here, don't you see? But on the other hand, the government has confined the terrorists to their enclave in Tigray region. A government spokesperson has declared that they do not have any interest in pursuing them in every village and town. But they are going to make sure they are not able to mount any more attacks on Ethiopian people again. The government is also discussing aid to all the regions affected by the war, including Tigray. But we know that America does not take defeat lightly, so I'm going to keep you updated on what's going on there, okay?